Hey, good morning, or whatever time it is where you are. Hey, hi, welcome. Today, a little bit of a controversial thing. Not necessarily controversial, but certainly problematic in all of it. And just looking at it now, I forgot to move my green screen. Just give me a sec. There, that looks a bit neater and tidier. I apologize. Music's down. Yeah, just maybe let me put it on pause just in case we have difficulties. But want to talk about something that all of us deal with as safety professionals. And realistically, what it is how do we overcome safety resistance? Apathy. It's difficult, and it's something that happens constantly in our line of work. It really doesn't matter where we're working, whether it be construction, resource-based like oil and gas, logging, manufacturing like sawmilling or factories, retail, healthcare. There's always a little bit or a lot of resistance to safety. And, honestly, it occurs whether you're a brand new safety person or just starting out in the field, a veteran. And honestly, we all have difficulty and we all struggle with it. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and that's what we're going to go through. So stick with me, but there's a few things that we need to discuss first. And so first and foremost is the chat rules. Okay, so I encourage you to hop into the chat, leave messages, and so forth. And in fact, participate. Introductions, introduce yourself. They're nice. It's nice to find out who you are, where you're coming from, especially since a lot of people said, hey, I want to be in the chat today and so forth. I'm hoping people will enter into the chat and have some good comments. And in fact, ask and answer. If a question comes across in the chat, by all means, you want to say something, answer, go right ahead. Your knowledge, your opinions count. Your participation is asked for. It's requested. It's expected. The idea is forming a community and pooling our knowledge, but let's not pool our ignorance. Be assured of what you're going to say. Be civil. No name calling, no insults, no ad hominem attacks. None of us are pop out of the womb being safety experts. I sure as heck didn't. In fact, I was one of the worst case scenarios. I was that problem child as far as safety went until I started moving and gaining more experience. So please, by all means, be patient with those who may be asking what you think is an easy question. Answer them, and if I don't get to it especially. Now, the other thing to understand is this is not considered professional advice or consultation in any way, shape, or form. No contracts are being signed. No money is changing hands. All this is collaboration, communication, conversation, and discussion. Okay, and talking about safety issues as we see them and as we encounter them in the course of our careers. Now, before we get too far, one thing that I want to talk about coming up this week is Bell Let's Talk, January 25th. It's Bell Let's Talk Day. And a lot of people, I was raised in an environment and a time where we didn't talk about these things, where we brushed them under the carpet. It wasn't a topic of conversation. But mental health is a very real thing. And it's a real thing in the workplace as well. And a lot of times what happens is people leave it by the wayside. They don't want to talk about it, whether it's happening to them or if they're the coworker, the manager, the supervisor, etc. And realistically, that's what Let's Talk is about. Bell's changed what they're doing this year. Instead of donating a nickel every time that there's hashtag Let's Talk, what they're doing is they're just donating $10 million to different organizations that support mental health initiatives. Either way, regardless of what's going on, it's a good thing. We need to talk about it. So, whenever you're communicating on social media this week coming up, and especially January 25th, just hashtag Let's Talk. Okay, you got to have it a little closer together. You got to have it all as one word. But hashtag Let's Talk. Whether it be Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, is that still a thing? I don't know. Instagram, etc. Let's talk. And hashtag Let's Talk. Because let's talk. Let's have the conversation. Let's not leave mental health with the stigma. Because it shouldn't have a stigma. It should be out in the open. I was having a conversation with a colleague the other day, and we were talking, and it is a difficult conversation, and because of that, a lot of people don't want to broach it. But realistically, when you hear someone say something like, you know what, I have severe anxiety attacks. There's times I run to the bathroom, I'm almost going to get sick. There's times when I get so overwhelmed and think I'm not going to make my deadlines or marks, I get physically ill. Realistically, why not have the conversation? Because that person is there because they're good at their job. Or you've hired them and because they went through the interview and everything, and you have realized they'll be a good fit. So why not go that extra mile, have that conversation, and it might be just as simple as, okay, what do we need to do to equip you for success and empower you to do this job? And you know what? Honestly, if my parents were still alive today and they heard me talking like this, they'd say, who the heck is this guy? But it's something I've come to realize, so I can't stress it enough. There's an importance to have that conversation. So let's talk. Now, other thing I want to discuss is what's coming up in the channel. There's a few things I've got in the queue, but once again, it's that thing. This is my part-time gig. This is something I do as a hobby. Yes, the channel is getting close to being monetized, and awesome, great thing. However, no matter what, I have a full-time job. I have family commitments. I have external commitments, etc. So I'm going to do the best I can to try and have a video a week and live stream every 2 weeks. Believe you me, I'd love to live stream every weekend, have 2 videos a week, etc. I'd love to do that, but the time constraint isn't there. But the things I do have in the queue are this. I want to talk about workplace safety inspections, because a lot of people treat them as a chore, as a checkbox on a list of to-dos, etc., and they're extremely important. They're a proactive process within the hazard identification, assessment, and control foundation, or process that is the foundation of any occupational health and safety management system or your existing program. The other thing I want to discuss is more about safety systems and how they influence safety culture. So look forward to a few videos, more videos coming out on that, because like anything else, safety culture is extremely important. A lot of people think you have to build the system. Actually, it's almost chicken and an egg, or both and. You have to create that environment for the system to flourish, for the people to flourish, for safety to flourish. So honestly, culture is extremely important. It creates that environment. And I've made short videos about safety culture, and I'll talk more about it in the coming months. I want to talk about incident reporting, because it's a lot of people are not understanding what to report, about reporting, and how the necessity behind it, etc. So I want to be able to talk more about incident reporting and even more videos on incident investigation. And I am trying to do it and keep the videos short for this: root cause and failure modes effects analysis and fault tree analysis. They're both very important to determining root cause. I still rely heavily on the 5 whys as far as it goes for root cause, because the 5 whys are an extremely necessary piece, I see, especially where people are involved. A lot of times what happens is people get focused on the equipment. They get focused on the stuff that we use. But realistically, look at the whys, look at the people involved. It's becomes very important. Now, on the note about equipment, I just want to talk about something else I just purchased recently to assist me. I do a lot of in-home instruction and training. And so I purchased something actually quite neat. It's called an OBSBot Tiny. And here it is right here. It's actually a webcam, but what's neat about it is it works with AI. So for instance, I hold my hand up like this and it'll follow me around the room. So I bought it because a lot of times I will demonstrate ergonomic principles, etc. But a few of the things that I also noticed were important is I wanted to be able to give lectures and have something off to the side on either side of me, etc. But I also wanted to be able to use a whiteboard. And I don't have any lights back there because I'm not worried about teaching today. I'm more concerned about the live stream and presenting the subject matter. But I just thought I'd show that and indicate that I'm doing a lot of in-home instruction as well. And I will be every once in a while incorporating this into some of the videos or some of the live streams, depending on the content of the live stream. So there was just a few quick motions, and you see them right now, like when I do this, reset it, or even punch in. The whole thing is, I don't want anybody to all of a sudden say, Kevin, are you trying to give me a seizure? That's not the point. So just as a warning, and if you have comments about the whole thing, let me know in the comments or pop something into the chat. I appreciate opinions. I'll do a video on how I'm going to be using this for online instruction later on. But right now, just thought I'd just quickly introduce it as part of the process. Now, once again, I appreciate your interactions. We're going to do a Q&A towards the end. And part of those Q&As have come up as material that's come up from the comments. So your interaction is important. Leaving comments is extremely important. It boosts things up in the algorithm, but it also gives me an idea on what you guys are thinking, or you ladies are thinking, you folks are thinking. Some of the issues you have at hand, some of the questions you want answered, etc. So your interaction is important, not just in the chat during the live streams, but also the comments. It helps me to understand what you want to see and what you want to hear. Yeah, so now let's get into it. Let's start talking more about the issues at hand, and that is that apathy. First and foremost, as far as resistance goes, and we've heard all, and I'll talk about some of the reactions that you're going to get. But when you're bringing things to the forefront, when you're trying to accelerate your health and safety program, when you're trying to bring in new initiatives, when you're even trying to point out non-compliance, the most important thing that you have to understand is you need to be right. So on the note of being right, do your research. Make sure that you've got, if you have to interpret legislation, make sure that you've done it correctly. Make sure that you've dove into it and read all of the fine points, because the culmination of this is not your opinion. Your opinion does not count. The facts count. Because no matter what, the legislation and the facts will speak for themselves. All you are is the messenger. And if you look at it that way, that helps with that apathy. That helps with the resistance. Because realistically, it's not Kevin's opinion that we're dwelling on. What it is just exactly that, the facts, the legislation. Now, when you also have to understand is that non-compliance equates to increased risk. It does. And with, I have not come across, and if you have come across where non-compliance doesn't increase your risk, by all means, let me know. Pop something into the comments, let me know in the chat. But realistically, non-compliance usually equates to increased risk. And the whole notion is we're looking to decrease risk wherever we are and with whatever we do. That's the whole piece here, is to decrease risk. So, sorry, my PowerPoint disappeared. There we go, back again. That's part of what you have to understand. So when you're thinking, I got to fight the good fight, prioritize your good fight. Look and use your risk matrix and understand, what is the investment that I need to put into this? Can I push it off to the side and just leave it be for now? I'm not saying that we can just let non-compliance go and just let unsafe situations go, but understand, where does this sit in your risk matrix? Where does it sit as far as risk goes? Keep in mind too, the other thing is, with non-compliance, it's usually the absence of controls. Okay, that means that there is uncontrolled hazards. There is a dangerous situation or unsafe situation, whichever way you want to put it. It's funny, jurisdictions all over the place describe it as differently. Some people call it, or some groups call it dangerous work. Some groups call it unsafe work. Dangerous is full of danger. Unsafe is the absence of safety. It really doesn't matter. Look at it this way. There's an absence of controls. There's a hazardous situation or a hazard present where there's no controls or inadequate controls. Think of it that way. Now, the other thing that you have to understand, and a lot of this is about you, if you've noticed that, look at you in the mirror first. Give yourself the gut check. Okay? Diplomacy is essential. I dislike the term. I hate the term safety Nazi. But unfortunately, there's health and safety professionals, using the term loosely, that feel that they need to dictate safety. They need to have it a heavy hand. And it doesn't have to be. Not at all. I'm just checking and looking at my mic. Is my sound coming across? I'm just going to turn it up just a little bit. There we go. Wasn't sure if it was coming across well enough or not. But diplomacy is essential. The old saying that my grandmother used to use all the time is, you can win more flies with honey, or you can attract more flies with honey than with vinegar. Yeah, absolutely true. Not thinking of your coworkers as flies, but you can learn to soft sell things and approach it without a dictatorial or tyrannical attitude. Yes, safety is absolutely essential. Your job is important. People working safe is important. But how you put the message across is just as important, okay? It's not going to be received well if you're going to be carrying a big stick all the time. Sometimes you got to use more carrot than stick, okay? Now, whenever we're working through these things, there's some other principles that we can follow. There's some other things that we can do. And of course, one of them is listen to the excuses, but have some responses. We want to foster a good safety culture. We want to keep safety on the forefront of everybody's minds when they're doing things. We don't want it to be a checkbox. We don't want it to be a chore. We want it to fit in naturally with what they're doing. Because often the answer we hear all the time is, it costs too much. It's too much time, or it's too much money, or it's both. I don't have the time and money for this, etc. So when we're approaching things, we have to hear those thoughts. Those are those people's opinion. Those are the whether it's your coworkers, whether it's your direct colleagues, your safety colleagues, your managers, your supervisors, even the executive. Your part of your job is to listen and to hear them, but to have a pragmatic, erudite response, like a knowledgeable response. And so and ask the question back, well, how can we fit this in? How can we, whatever it is, and there's lots of different examples you can use. One of the big ones was when I was trying to institute a working alone process and a check-in process. I had a dean throw the process that I had got him to review and have a look at, because he was one of the major ones that was constantly traveling, and I wanted him to do a check-in process. And he threw it back at me. He says, too much work. And I said, well, can we sit down with this for a second? You get email on your phone, right? Yeah. So is there a problem with emailing reception and letting them know the time you're departing, the expected time you get there, and they can call you? Well, no, that's not a big deal. It says it in the document. So sometimes you just have to take the time to explain, listen, explain, but hear that person's concerns. And that follows just along with the same thing. It's too difficult. It adds too many steps. Like you're making it too hard. And so once again, listen and see if there's a way that you can incorporate it in. Because a lot of times we're all busy. And we look at that end goal. We look at what we want to do. We look at what our task is. We look at what completion looks like. And then that's where we want to be. That's what we want to get done. So when you're going to create some sort of a safety initiative or a process, or you want to outline a safe work process, make sure that you look at what is being done first, and then how you incorporate safety into that process. Because process should continue because of safety. It should not be halted or impeded because of safety. Okay? So if what you're doing is adding more steps and more difficulty to a situation, then maybe check what you're doing too. The other one that I get all the time too is, never had to do that on my other job. Maybe so. And there could be a lot of different reasons. My next point might address some of it, but regardless, sometimes you have to, and that once again incorporates the necessity for having a very good new hire or new worker safety, orientation process. It also has it's very good affirmation of why you need good quality control and quality assurance process. And part of that QA and QC is good supervision and good safety interaction with the safety professional or with whoever's tasked with doing safety at work. And so regardless if they didn't have to do that on their other job, it has to be done here. What you might have to do is go back to the other 2 points and answer why it's being done and how it's being done. So once again, it goes back to that diplomacy point and explaining. I find that we as safety professionals will have to validate ourselves and affirmate ourselves on a constant basis, no matter what we do. The other thing is, if the organization is out of jurisdiction or the worker has come from a different jurisdiction or geographical place, honestly, a lot of times you'll have differences. Like for instance, with BC and Alberta, where I was working, where I was very close to the Alberta border, there's a lot of times companies going back and forth. And a fellow from WorkSafe BC used to call me and say, yeah, I really wish I could get these Alberta people to figure out cranes. But once again, at that time, there was a lot of differences in reporting and how things looked and so forth. And yeah, things have got a bit closer, but we have to understand there's always going to be jurisdictional differences. And the last one I hear all the time is, what are the chances of that happening? And you know what? I can't tell the future. If I could, I'd be very, very rich. I'd likely still be doing this because I love doing this, but I'd be very, very rich. I'd have all sorts of cool gadgets. I would have more than one vehicle. I would be very rich. But I can't tell the future, so I can't tell you what the chances are. And so that's why, and one of the best ways that I've ever had to deal with this or been able to deal with it is make sure that you look at organizations in similar circumstances where it has happened to them. Whether it be construction and scaffolding incidents or retail and musculoskeletal disorders or healthcare and workplace violence. Whatever it is, you can compare. The stuff is out there. So once again, it goes back to that doing your research and how doing your research is absolutely necessary. Because you want to be able to come back and indicate that you're knowledgeable, you know what you're doing, you have done your research, you're coming with credible information and facts. It's extremely important. A lot of people will ask, well, can you point that out to me? Can you show me that, etc.? And no fear in doing that. None whatsoever. A lot of times I've had to quote legislation, piece it together, provide it to people. It's not unusual. So by all means, be prepared to say, yep, this is what the legislation says. This is what the regulation says. This is what the code says. This is what the CSA standards say, or whatever standards, ISO, whatever you're operating off of, you may have to actually have it there in black and white or white on black or whatever the case may be for them to see. Because once again, it's not your opinion and it's okay to be questioned. A lot of times when I first started out, I took it as a personal challenge. It's not a personal challenge. A lot of times it's just a question. And we have to remember, no matter what, it always seems impossible until it's done. So don't give up hope. If people aren't complying or they're apathetic and you're constantly having to answer questions, it's just the way it is. But a couple of other things, and I've got some principles that you can use and some steps that you can use, especially when you're hitting that brick wall. Okay? Number one, talk to your supervisor. No matter who it is, everybody has a supervisor. Even the CEO, in most cases, has to report to a board of directors. Okay? Nobody has complete autonomy unless they're a sole proprietor. Okay? Yes, you look at Elon Musk and Twitter, for instance, and yeah, he sort of is, but he's still got a board to answer to in some instances, some cases, but he also has to answer to the general public. So no matter what, we have to answer to somebody. So go talk to your supervisor, read them in. If you're encountering something, then make sure you've done your homework, make sure you're prepared, because no matter what, you don't want to waste anybody's time. Okay? You want to make sure that you're being purposeful and mindful of their time, or mindful of their time and being purposeful in what you're doing. So make sure you're prepared, read your supervisor in. And part of that is going to be outlining all of the risks, including the social risks. Look, if we allow this to happen, we're in the public eye, and chances are, and the question I've always asked my supervisors is, what do you want to read in the news in the morning? Sometimes we have to outline that gut check. Okay? And the 3 gut check rules I have are, what are you willing to say in front of a judge? What are you willing to read in the news in the morning? And what are you willing to explain to your family? If you do those 3 gut checks, usually you come out with making a good decision. Okay? So gut checks are important. Now, when you've outlined all the risks, make sure you're realistic. What drives me nuts is, well, we're going to give penalties. This outfit got a $250,000 fine. And by all means, penalties are a realistic situation, but not all the time. Okay? So, yes, penalties are possible, orders are possible, etc., depending on the jurisdiction you're in. But be realistic when you're describing what could be the probable outcome. Okay? So have that conversation, outline the risks, but be realistic. And then the other thing, always, no matter who you're talking to, whether it be your supervisor or a manager of an area that you're having to deal with, etc., but follow up with an email, a pragmatic email, one that's not passionate. You can be passionate while writing it, but be neutral when you're writing it. Be businesslike and follow some proper processes. Be courteous and professional. And no matter what, 3D your document. When I say 3D, make sure you have dates in it, first D. Make sure that it is dependable. In other words, person, place, time, everything identified accordingly. And then the last thing is defendable. Not your opinion. It is based on legislation, industry practice, or internal company policy and industry practices. Remember, your opinions are great and opinions are awesome. They're like eyebrows. Everybody's got one or two, hopefully not three. But follow up with your email and be pragmatic. Now, a couple of other things that you have at your disposal as well. And the big one, the one that I always harp on, and that's the Safety Committee. They're that bipartisan group that is formed, and when I say bipartisan, meaning members that represent the workforce and represent the employer, and they're there with that responsibility of maintaining that safe workplace and handling issues on behalf of the employer, making recommendations to the employer. On that note, you have to realize that recommendations work, usually. A lot of times too, remember, a lot of jurisdictions will have a requirement for a timely response. Some actually outline it, depending on where you are. Last time I looked in British Columbia, for instance, our western province, it was 21 days. Here I am now in Alberta, just slightly over. If you're looking at a map, we're to the right. And, ooh, boy, pun. Anyway, we say in a timely fashion. And so you can outline in your health and safety management system, in your program, itchy nose, what timely looks like. Whether it be 30 days or whether you base it on your risk matrix or whatever the case may be. My advice is always base it on your risk matrix and have a cascading time. So low risk stuff, 30 days, higher risk, 15, moderate risk, 15, high risk, 5 days, etc. But however, that's problematic for some employers. So you're going to have to base it on what you on your particular circumstances. And that's why there's no such thing, and it drives me nuts. And go ahead, attack me if you want, safety professionals. I think I'd win this argument hands down. There is no good cookie cutter health and safety program. Okay? If you're looking for it and want a quick fix, don't waste your time. Honestly, health and safety programs have to be tailored to the organization. It's like going hiking in somebody else's boots or eating a meal with someone else's teeth. Okay, it just may work sort of slightly in the short term, but it's not going to work very long. Okay, so don't do it. So make your recommendations to the employer based on what your program says or based on what the jurisdiction requires, and make sure those, and I've done a video, go ahead and look on it, on making recommendations to the employer. And they're based, once again, same thing, sound facts, not opinion, but based on the legislation, company policy, or industry best practices, or a combination of all three. Now, the other thing is there's our union, and if you're run by a union, there are shop stewards. Work, and I've had excellent relationships with shop stewards, and then I've had poor relationships. And no matter what I've done, some of that is the history before you. But try to always hit it off with the shop stewards and be in a good working relationship with them, because it's very helpful, especially when you run into resistance with health and safety stuff. Honestly, it does. Now, the other thing is you have to allow time for change. Okay? I've done a recommendation to the employer, and I thought it was very bright and well done. And, well, I coached the health and safety committee into doing it and how to do it. And they did it because the other thing, as a safety professional, I try not to be a voting member on a safety committee. I try to be that advisory person. I try to be ex officio and just provide the advice. Now, they responded in 21 days. They took the 21 days. This is back when I was BC, and they said, thank you for your recommendation. We have read it and we're taking it into consideration. It's like, Laura, at least respond with some sort of a timeline or what have you, or the process, but it was just basically that typical diplomatic thing. And I went back to the executive director, who was also in the transition as the vice president of corporate services, and I said, what are you doing? He said, well, we responded. And the legislation says all we have to do is respond within 21 days. But at least come up with something. You're not really working on any kind of good relationship when you do this. So anyway, yes, things changed as a result of that. Now, the big question gets asked. What about when it's how to get a safety committee going? Or having your safety committee in place, or even trying to resurrect a safety committee or getting members for a safety committee, and you're getting nothing. Now what do you do? Good question. Really good question. And honestly, it's something that does occur. I've seen it in organizations where they want to get a safety committee together, and the boss is having none of it. So what do you do? Well, like anything else, you talk to other workers. Okay? It's important. Remember, every organization is built on its workforce. It moves forward, it propels, it is successful because of its workforce. So talk to the workers. Excuse me, got to get a drink. So talk to the other workers and find out, do they have the same issues? Are they having issues with what you're trying to bring forward, especially if it's a safety committee? If you have workers that want to be on the safety committee, it's a good time to engage them, talk to them, find out their opinions, their thoughts, what they think. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having conversations. And a lot of times those conversations help you to be productive and form that good business case. And find out what's the history. We all walk into situations, and my favorite answer, I don't know if favorite is the right way to say this, but my favorite answer is, well, it's been like this forever. Or it's been like this ever since I've been here, and I've been here for 20 years. Like anything else, it doesn't necessarily make it right, but at least you know what you're up against. The other thing is, and this is a rule of thumb I've developed, and it works well for me. If it's been happening for a long time, it means it's going to take time to change it. So that's going back to that allow time for change. Yes, understandably. In most jurisdictions here in Canada, if you're required by the legislation to have a health and safety committee and you don't have a health and safety committee, pretty much means you're in non-compliance with the legislation. If non-compliance with the legislation, really put it simple, it's breaking the law. However, once again, having that heavy stick and is not going to work for anybody. Trying to get something across by starting an argument is never the way. Now, the other thing is, and I've stressed it before for safety professionals, is develop a network. Have other people you talk to, or even if you're in an organization with other safety professionals, talk to them. Find out what's going on. Do you have the opportunity for external advice? Have you got a mentor? Have you got somebody you can rely on? And it doesn't necessarily need to be a senior safety professional. I talk to a lot of people in a lot of different walks of life. most of them older than me, but some of them younger than me, just to bounce things off them and get that external device or once again, I'm a nerd, external advice and get their perspective on things. Whether it be a pastor at my church, whether it be my best buddy who's a geologist, or just colleagues and friends. A lot of times bouncing stuff off other people or within your network helps you to get things back. I can remember I belonged to university and college emergency managers network, and I had to do something. I had some difficult questions and some difficult things I had to get over. So I just put it on the forum at the time. We had a list group. And man, the answers, I even had phone calls coming back and people calling me and talking to me and saying, hey, I've got other ideas through this. Now, talking to workers is great, but also talk to the other managers. Talk to the managers that you're dealing with and find out where they are. You'd be surprised that they, a lot of times, have their heads down and just nose to the grindstone, working very hard. And a lot of times, if you just ask them about that situation, they may also say, yes, I know we're supposed to have a safety committee, or yes, I know we're supposed to be doing this. And get their opinion, get their thought. Now, James Cotter, in his 8 points on bringing about change, and one of them talks about forming a coalition. Now, when you form a coalition, that doesn't mean, and I know it sounds, especially here in Canada when we have the Liberal and NDP thing happening, but it's forming a group that wants that common goal, okay? And so it's not mutiny, it's nothing like that. But what you can do is you can have the opportunity to talk and discuss and look at those things, and then have that opportunity to present that case to the employer, whether you get one of the managers that you were talking to have that FaceTime with the employer. You write a letter and you all sign it and say, look, we need to do this, and can we do this, and have a business case on how to do it. There's nothing wrong with that, and it gives you an alternative. Because there's other alternatives, and we want to watch, and I'm going to talk about some of those in just a sec. But I also want to entertain your comments and ask you what your thoughts are if you've run into these things and how you've got over them. Because there are a few, and with the Board of Canadian Registered Safety Professionals, one of the things that we have to do every cycle when we renew, we have to gather continuing education credits and be always lifelong learners and show how we've been working in the field, show how we've been studying and what courses and what information that we've been taking in and training. Part of that is doing an ethics course, and a lot of times some of the questions in those ethics courses are just that. They revolve around employers not doing things to be safe, or co-workers working unsafely and they're friends of ours, etc. And how do we surmount them? And realistically, it's something that we all come about with. And so there is those opportunities of making anonymous complaints to the authority having jurisdiction. I know of safety professionals who have done it. I've never done it. Honestly, I've never done it. But I do know of safety professionals who have done it. I know of safety professionals who have coached others into doing it. I've never done that either. I haven't had the need to. But if workers come forward, they're concerned, and you've hit that wall, that might be just a matter of, hey, you do have that opportunity. I've done all I can do. You do have that opportunity of making that anonymous complaint. Once again, you have to realize anonymous is only anonymous based on the probability of discovery. If you work in an organization of 6 people and you make an anonymous complaint, it's going to be pretty easy to figure it out. Now, if you work in an organization of thousands of people and you make an anonymous complaint, it might be pretty difficult. The other thing is the officers or the authority having jurisdiction, if it's permitted and acceptable in your organization, they won't tattletale. They won't. So keep in mind that is something to do. Now, I haven't done this either, but I have colleagues who have, and they've actually called up the authority having jurisdiction, the occupational safety officers, or whatever they're called in different locales, and said, hey, this is happening. Come write orders on our employer. Because our employer is not moving. They're not doing anything. Usually where I've found that that's working is in union-based environments where the safety professional was actually a member of a union. Or they were financially secure and they just didn't care. Because at that point, if you're getting to that point and going to be doing that, remember your network. Bounce it off the people in your network, your mentor, etc. first. Think long and hard, sleep on it if you can, and take it into consideration. Like I said, I haven't had to do it, but I have colleagues who have. And in fact, I was at a symposium once with safety professionals, and WorkSafe BC actually came in, and he said, don't mind them, they're going to sit down with my colleague because we're getting orders written on our organization today. And I was like, wow, really? And I talked to my colleague afterwards. He said, look, we've done everything we can do. And we can't let this unsafe situation go on, so we have to get orders written. Depending on where your jurisdiction is, the authority having jurisdiction, if they come for a visit and they have no choice, if they see non-compliance, they have to write orders. Orders are basically do this or else. That or else is usually some sort of an administrative penalty, whether it might be a stop work order, depending, or fines levied, etc. But that's usually that epiphany moment. That means like, oh, I better fix this or else. So keep your resume up to date. Make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date, etc. Because we do have, here in Canada, we have whistleblower protection in most jurisdictions. However, once again, usually that's reactive. That means you have whistleblower protection, you may get fired, and then you're still looking for a job, and you may get a cash award later on, or whatever the case may be, or your employer may be told to reinstate your job. No matter what, that's tough. Okay? So keep your resume up to date. And I personally, I wouldn't let an unsafe situation go on. If I've got to that point where, I've hit the wall, I'm going to quit, I would make sure that my colleagues and coworkers are protected. That's just me. Now, you have to remember, and this is a very favorite saying, and thank you, one of my colleagues, KL, I'll just mention them by their initials, KL. She introduced me to this person, and this person is awesome. If you ever have an opportunity to look at any, read any, or listen and watch any of her TED Talks, by all means do so. Rosabeth Cantor. And she said, everything looks like failure in the middle. Okay? And we've heard all of the other sayings that are embroidered on pillows. It's darkest before the dawn and everything else like that. But everything looks like failure in the middle. So when you're partway through something, it never looks like it's going to get anywhere. It doesn't. Okay? But no matter what, keep your chin up and keep at it, because you'd be surprised that all of a sudden people will go, hey, I want to change. I want to do this. And I don't know. It may be them waking up one morning and saying, yes, we've got to have a safety committee. Or yes, we do need a safe work process for when our workers are using scaffolds. Or yes, that scaffold is out of date, it's never been inspected, and we should quit letting people go up on it. Whatever the case may be, people may come and have that epiphany. So don't give up, whatever you do. A lot of people do give up, and you shouldn't. So now, the other thing is, had quite a few questions come up in the last little while, all of them by one person who's brought them up. And so this is that Q&A period. So if you're watching and you've entered in, left, or your computer's gone to sleep or whatever, hopefully you wake up and you have the opportunity to ask some additional questions. But one of them is, can you explain what is a working method statement and why it's important for conducting risk assessment. And thank you for that. And you know what? Really and truthfully, here's what it is. A method statement, it's a type of health and safety document when there is a setting where it's high-risk work. And it's used for where there's high-risk work. It describes, basically, it identifies what the work is to be done, the method that is going to be used for carrying out that work, and who's responsible for what, etc. Essentially, and here in a lot of settings in Canada, what we call it is a safe work plan. Many jurisdictions require them for things like where you're working at extreme heights or confined space entry, high voltage electric work, etc. It's actually a requirement to have that safe working plan in place before you even begin that work. And it does the same thing, outlines the work to be done, outlines all of the controls necessary, identifies all the hazards, identifies all the controls necessary to eliminate or significantly reduce those hazards, and then outlines responsibilities, who's responsible for what, etc. A lot of times they're used hand in hand with work permits, like say, for instance, hot work permits, or if your organization has adopted confined space entry and working at heights permits, etc. They're used hand in hand, safe work plans or method statements, or the method statement might be an incorporation of the permitting process. So by all means, likely you need to go back and what does your jurisdiction do and what does your jurisdiction require? What does the organization require? And if you're hiring contractors, what are they doing? You have to remember, hiring a contractor does not necessarily absolve you of risk, and it doesn't allow for vicarious transfer of risk either, or transfer of vicarious risk, whatever you want to look at. A lot of times you still have an inherent responsibility as the owner of the work. So make sure you're aware. Really good question. Now, the next one, unfortunately, I've got them up on my monitor in front of or behind the camera, so I have to really squint. Do safety committees need safety leadership, or is the safety committee a safety leader? So once again, do safety committees need safety leadership, or is the safety committee a safety leader? Guess what? Both and. Or yes. It's both. And I've made videos regarding health and safety committees. They are an absolutely important and imperative piece of your health and safety program, your management system, etc. They are basically the pulse of the safety culture in the organization. They're also the lifeblood. They're made up of, because they're made up of representation of both management and workforce, they have a good indication of what the perception of health and safety is in the organization as a whole. And so they're very important, and they do take a leadership role. Now, that being said, health and safety committees should have a position on them for the health and safety professional. Usually, what I recommend is being ex officio, being that fly on the wall, being that person that is there to provide advice, consultation. Because what I find a lot of times with safety committees is that question comes up and then they all look at the safety professional, or they all look at the safety professional. And realistically, that can't be the case. You need to be there to provide that information, that guidance, and allow them to work through to the answer and then having the recommendation of the employer. Then they can take that leadership stance, they can take that leadership mantle on and provide that recommendation to the employer. So, does the safety committee need leadership? By all means, yes, it does. They should have 2 co-chairs. They should have an advisory person with the health and safety professional on it. But they should also take that leadership role within the organization. I know it sounded complicated and likely a bit mixed up, but they are both. Okay? Really important. Now, like anything else, Interesting. Another question that comes up here is this. Why safety leadership? Let me read this again. Oh, yes, sorry. Why safety leadership drives the safety culture and how it leads to good safety performance. And you know what? It's an excellent question. There a few studies have been done, and if I have to, if you need, leave me a comment or pop something into the chat and I'll go track them down and I'll put them back in the description and links in the description, where they've studied the safety culture in different organizations where there's been a healthy safety culture and good safety performance, and there's been an apathetic or absent safety culture and very poor safety performance. But if you think about it, a culture is just a common set of beliefs that are engaged or adopted by a group of people. And that group of people is looking at those beliefs and values and holding them and making them a part of what they do. So a safety culture is just that. Safety becomes woven into the fabric of your work and your workplace. And if that's the case, then it becomes part of what you do. And if safety is on the forefront and it's not just a checkbox on a list of things that you might not look at, but it becomes a methodology, a process, and how you commit those tasks that you're doing, then safety culture leads to good safety performance. And that's an excellent question, and it's absolutely true. Thank you for that question. Now, the other question is, how can you build powerful safety leadership? You have to be there, and that's it in a nutshell. In fact, and it's not something that can be explained quickly in a short live stream. And in fact, I either co-facilitate, and I've helped revamp and redesign a safety leadership workshop. It's a 3-day long workshop, run usually over 3 consecutive weeks, 1 day a week, with the organization I work for, the Continuing Care Safety Association of Alberta. And it's valuable. I love it. I think it is an incredible workshop. And it's not something I created, though a lot of the footwork was done well before I got there. I've just helped in some of the revamping and redesign. But it is an excellent workshop. And if anybody's interested, let me know in the chat or the comments, and I can pop a link in the description. Or you can go to, here, I'll put it in the chat, see if it'll go into the chat. It might not. Oh, look at that. You can go to that URL. There you can. You can go to that URL and have a search for safety leadership, and or look at the courses and just look at the course descriptions for safety leadership. Keeping in mind, too, that if you're required to have maintenance points or continuing education points, it is eligible for those as well, because it's a structured course. Each one is 7.5 hours. Each session is 7.5 hours in length. So it works out to a little over 21 hours, which is a requirement. Not only that, the Alberta Jobs Grant, you're eligible for funding through the Alberta Jobs Grant for it too as well. So I encourage you to look it up, have a look at it, and even if you want to leave your thoughts afterwards, by all means. And it's not just because I've been a part of it or I'm part of the organization. I would not endorse anything that I didn't see as having very good intrinsic and extrinsic value. Absolutely. And it allows for a lot of good collaboration with colleagues and like-minded people within it. And so now we've hit that point where if any of you have any questions that you want to pop into the chat, by all means, yeah. I have to wait a few minutes here. I apologize because there's a bit of a delay. And I found I've just been about to sign off, and all of a sudden people are going, Kevin, I have a question. And so I don't want to interrupt that. But in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll just talk about some thoughts I have as additions onto the live stream, and you can let me know in the comments or pop it into the chat if you think these would be a good thing. I was thinking of a bi-weekly wrap-up for workplace incidents that are noteworthy and newsworthy, or things that I have seen. Just because a lot of times some of them deserve mention, just in the fact that you might be dealing with them as well, and help you to bring that to the forefront, because, as I said before, having the ability to use examples for groups that are in a similar set of circumstances and having those mishaps happen, it provides you with that opportunity to bring that to light. So that's one. Another one is just featuring some outlandish non-compliance pictures, workplace fails. I've done a series on fixing workplace fails, and I add to it a little bit once in a while when I have the time and I come across something. So just thoughts on that, and it gives us also an opportunity to look at it, collaborate, and form those corrective actions and practice that skill of forming corrective actions. And because a lot of times what happens is you should think of your corrective actions as a two-step. What can we do in the short term right now to fix it so work can continue, rather than stopping work outright? And then the next thing is you should always try to consider what you can do for a long-term fix, and planning it where you're going to have a budget, assign responsibilities, timelines, etc. So a lot of times corrective actions might be two steps or twofold, and so it gives you an opportunity to practice that. Just a thought. The other one is upcoming legislative changes or trend changes, and where we see any other OHS-related news heading beyond that, just beyond incidents and mishaps and workplace fails. So just some thoughts on where I want to carry through and add things to the live stream. But once again, I appreciate your input, because you're the ones that sit through it, not me. I'm just here in front of the camera. Yeah, so there we go. So I haven't had any questions pop up. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So do me a favor now, as you're heading out into the weekend. Remember, as you begin your work week next week, think about safety. Keep it on the forefront of whatever you do. Because when you're thinking about safety, talking about safety, you start doing safety. And when you're doing safety, you provoke safety. You're being a safety influencer and provoking it in your workplace and in everything you do. Okay? Walk the walk and talk the talk. Okay? So there we go. Thank you for joining me. Take care. Bye for now.